to the
This meeting is being recorded.
welcome to the Audit Committee today, the Audit and Assurance Committee on Monday the 7th of February, still via Zoom obviously, but who knows if for the future whether we might actually get back in person. So welcome to everybody. I'd just like to welcome Rhiannon this morning. This is Rhiannon's first meeting in her new role. So very warm welcome to Rhiannon. And I was going to welcome Jonathan, but I'll do that if he's coming along later. So thank you. So any apologies for absence? David?
We've had one from Avisha from Audit Wales. No other apologies have been received.
Okay, thank you. Do I have any declarations of interest?
None received.
No. Okay, thank you. So if I move on to the unconfirmed minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of October and go through in the first place for accuracy. So page 1, page 2, page 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So can I confirm that those are an accurate record?
Yes.
Okay. And are there any matters arising from me? I'm sorry. So moving on to the action log from the meeting. I think these are mainly complete, David, aren't they?
They're all complete, Chair.
Thank you. So note those. Are there any matters arising from the minutes that aren't on the agenda today? Martin.
None for me, sorry. Oh, sorry, the hands up. Sorry.
Just practicing, were you? Okay, thank you. So if we move on to part 2 of the meeting, matters for consideration. If we start with the annual accounts plan, Rhiannon, Martin, perhaps you could take us through this.
Yeah, so Martin can present the paper, but obviously we've drafted this to set out our intentions of closing the annual accounts, and Martin will take you through a bit more detail as included in the paper.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rhiannon. So I'm in T-Desk today. I'm struggling with a small laptop screen, so I do apologise for putting my hand up. That was an error. Just in terms of the annual accounts plan, somehow we're approaching the 4th set of accounts for HEIW. I'm not quite sure how it's happened, but it has. I've been asked to just bring this report to the Audit and Assurance Committee, just outlining our plan for this financial year. As you're aware, a significant amount of work has been done over the past few years, setting up the financial and governance arrangements since HEIW has been formed. And as a result, the first 3 set of accounts were successfully completed on time and to a high standard. So in terms of that, the current plan for this year, there's some minor improvements identified from our own work and also from speaking with Audit Wales and internal audit, but there's no significant changes to that. I've previously said year-end isn't just about my team producing the documents. It really is an organisational piece of work, and also from wider partners such as shared services. So our process reflects that, and it's very much a shared approach. We've got a detailed closing timetable and supporting guidance that we finalised last Friday, and that'll be going out to all staff in the next couple of days. And in terms of the key dates for this year, they are in Appendix 1 of this report, just setting out the dates that we're working to. There's no significant changes to those. They are broadly in line with last year. And from my discussions with Helen in Helen Goddard, we will try and get that done as quickly as we can through the audit process. It doesn't hang on. So I won't go through the detail in the paper. Just the one item I did really want to pick up was about the potential issues that we have this year. We do sort of a horizon scanning to look at what's coming up, what we need to look at and get the mitigations in place early. So I've set those out in the report starting on page 3, section 8, sorry, on page 3. The one I did want to just raise to the Audit Committee's attention is the pension tax annual allowance scheme pays arrangements. That's on the top of page 4. Colleagues will remember last year, all NHS Wales organisations included a disclosure in their accounts in terms of the potential impact of this. There's also an emphasis of matter note in the ISA 260 report that Wales Audit Office issued. And essentially this relates to a ministerial direction to fund the impact of any tax charges where the clinician opts to have the scheme paid. Last year, we didn't have the information available. It was too early in terms of the process. So a disclosure of contingent liability is always required. This year, we may be in a better position to understand the actual impact on HEIW. Although at this point in time, we still don't have the information available. We are chasing that from Welsh Government and the Pensions Agency to enable us to work out if there is actually an impact for us. The risk is the accounts could be qualified as they are due to the nature of the transaction going through. So that's the sort of the high risk one, I guess, which we are working on as a priority to understand if there is actually an impact for us. The other items on there we are dealing with, I don't think there's any particular issues with those, but I'm happy to take any questions on those. So essentially the year-end process has started. We are working on the draft accounts to be submitted on the 29th of April, and they're going to be brought to the Audit Committee on the 5th of May for your review, and we will highlight any sort of issues and the position at that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. That's very comprehensive. I had a couple of quick questions, if I may. The issue about annual leave and the administrative sort of, well, difficulties or nightmare, depending on which way you look at it. Is that likely to cause any difficulties in terms of the audit?
I think HEIW is in a very good position because most staff, if not all, use ESR to record their leave. So we have that information available. I was speaking to someone in Swansea Bay and they have 3,000 staff on paper records. So we certainly don't have that issue. The past few years, we've refined the process. There's an All Wales annual leave buyback scheme has gone out in the last few days, which closes the end of February. It's been discussed at TAG, it's been discussed at Deputy DOF. So I think we should be in a good position that the figures we have will be accurate. By the end of February, we will have the number of people who want to sell their leave back to HEIW. So we will have an actual cost for those. So it's not as much as issues as I think it could be.
No, it's just an added thing that you could probably do without at that point in time.
Absolutely.
And I mean, in terms of the pensions, I mean, it's a technicality. If they're qualified, they're qualified. I mean, I don't think the Audit Committee can get too worked up about it. It's not a qualification because we've done something wrong necessarily. It's an entirely different matter. So I think fairly relaxed about that.
Yeah, and we are doing all we can to identify if there is a liability for HEIW this year. There's only a small number of people who potentially you could do that at the moment. We are just trying to get to the bottom of it if the liability should fall on us. So we'd rather not have a qualification, obviously, but we appreciate that view.
Yeah, okay. Any other comments? Yes, Ruth.
Only just to reiterate that the plan itself and the proposal seems straightforward and sensible to me. I can't believe it's just come round again. It seems extraordinary. I was going to ask about the pension tax allowance issue, and Martin's clarified that. So I'm content with this as a way forward. Thanks, John. Thank
you, Ruth. That's helpful. Okay, so Helen and Claire, you did raise an issue about timing, which I think is being taken offline in terms of the committee. Is that being worked through?
Yes, I understand, Jill. I think you've raised it further, haven't you? With
with David, yeah.
Yeah, because the audit windows ever is so tight. If we can move the audit committee back slightly, that would be very helpful. From the 6th, I think it's in for at the moment. Is it to later that week or beginning of the following week would be really helpful to us. Thank you.
Is there any update on that, David?
Not yet. We'll get back to you. Sorry, I couldn't hear Claire. Could you repeat that? I'm really sorry.
Sorry. Can the rest of you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
We are looking to push the audit committee back a few days if possible. The submission deadline is the 15th of June, and I think currently the audit committee is down for the 6th. And obviously giving us an extra 3, 4, 5 days would be very helpful if possible, David.
Yes, of course. We'll look into that and get back to you.
Thank you.
I think it's already been looked into. Rhiannon, you've got your hands up. Do you want to shed any on this?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so we've sent Kathy Davies some sort of provisional dates on the sort of 10th, and then I think there's a weekend, and then a couple of days before the 15th when we have to submit. So it is tight, but I think we can squash everything in that we need to, before we've got to submit the accounts on the 15th.
Okay. Okay, the sooner people know if there is a change of date, then David, Kathy, the better, obviously.
We'll confirm that as quickly as we can.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, thanks, Martin, for that. So if we move on now to internal audit, I'll hand over to Paul, Emma and Ken.
Thank you, Jill. I'll talk very briefly around the progress report, and then I think that Ken is going to pick up the two detailed reports on the agenda today. The progress report is fairly self-explanatory, but I'll just draw out a couple of things. On the table at the back end of the report, 2 of the reviews that were shown as planned on this have now moved into work in progress, so the field work has begun, and that's the strategic readiness for digital and the risk management review. So moving through into work in progress. A couple of other things I wanted to say. Back in October, last time we met as a committee, there were a number of reviews lined up for Q3. So I guess with the onset of Omicron and various other pressures, we had some requests just to move things back a little bit, which is reasonable and fine thing to do. I guess what that just means is that obviously we've got to manage our resources a little bit, and we've got to think about making sure that we can do what we're saying we're going to do. So it does put a little bit of pressure onto the last quarter, but we will manage through that. And I guess linking that through to our 22-23 planning, which we're in the throes of doing at the moment, I guess it's a good time to, when we're having these round of discussions with the executive team, to make sure that we're clear what the timings of the reviews for 22-23 are going to be, and making sure we're having good and open discussions about nailing those timings down as best we can, notwithstanding the fact that obviously we're trying to look forward in sort of 12-13 months into the future. So, and there always has to be a degree of flexibility around that, but it's just, if we can get as close to the mark as we possibly can during those planning discussions, that's really helpful, both for us in terms of our planning, and obviously making sure that the directors are cited on things that will be coming their way in the forthcoming year. That's all I was planning to say on the progress report, but happy to take questions.
Okay, thanks, Paul. As you might expect, I was going to ask a question about the movement from Q3, and really a question of, there's only 6 weeks left to the year end. It feels a bit crushed in terms of the number of reviews now to get through. So is that going to be possible? And I suppose the subsidiary to that is, are we doing enough and I suppose it's a question really for David and Rhiannon, in terms of alerting people to the programme of audit and the audit committee work in terms of the organisation. So those are my two observations.
So we do circulate the annual plan until audit has, obviously, amongst the execs, and that's constantly updated as the year progresses. But we are looking into how we are updating going forward to see if we can make any improvements to something that is actually subject matter of an exec team report that's going to the execs this week. So we are looking to see if we can improve the way that we communicate so that the teams are as prepared as possible for internal audit reports.
Okay, that's helpful, David. Can you say that the audit committee are taking a keen interest in it, and whether there's more that we need to do?
Okay.
Thank you. Ruth.
Thank you, John. Just to add a bit to that, and I fully understand the circumstances and how we've got to be here, but actually if we were setting out, we wouldn't want to have done it. We wouldn't have wanted it to happen this way. So I'm just wondering whether there's any lessons we can learn from this. Can we reflect on it and think, could we have organised it better? Or could it have been organised better? Or is it simply just a product of the understandable pressures and uncertainties that we faced winding the clock back?
Sorry.
No, go on, Paul.
No, I was going to say, I think there's a strong degree of those pressures, those uncertainties that have existed over the last 12 months or so. But as I said, I think now is the time to have these open discussions when we're looking forward into the 2022-23 programme of work, to make sure that we're as open and honest as we possibly can be, to make sure that is, without having that crystal ball about how things may look down the line, but as I said, trying to get it as nailed down as we possibly can.
I think Ruth, your question is spot on, and perhaps David, that's a useful way of taking it forward to the exec team, which is, could we have done it differently? Is there anything that we didn't do to prepare people for the audits? And indeed, if it's something that they haven't experienced before, are we doing enough to explain the role of audit and what they can expect? So perhaps, if you wouldn't mind, if you could take those thoughts from the audit committee forward.
Yes, we'll do. It's actually something that we are looking at now as it happens, so it's very timely, those comments. Thank you.
Good, thank you. And Paul, I'm sure you weren't ducking the question. Will you be able to complete the programme in the time available, given the movement?
I would say that to have completed all the field work by the end of March is going to be would be a huge challenge. In terms of getting the work done that we need to do in terms of the reporting cycle, then yes, that's fine. We'll be able to do that. So not ideal, but we'll get to where we need to get to for just for sequence for the annual reporting.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, sorry, still. Do we want to move on to the internal audit reports? That was for noting, wasn't it, David? The progress report.
Yes.
Yeah. So duly noted. Yes. Good. Okay. Sorry, Ken.
Okay, so we have two final reports for the committee today, the financial planning process and the Mars appraisal system. I'll start with the financial planning process. So the start of the planning cycle for HEIW is the drawing up of the Education Commissioning Plan by the Nurse and Health Professional Directorate. Finance then cost the plan, which is used to develop the resource plan, and then after that, the delegated budgets. our audit focused on the processes for the costing of the education commissioning plan by finance. I'm pleased to say there was only one low priority finding, and we provided substantial assurance for this audit. Not much else to say really, if anybody has any comments or questions.
Has anybody got any comments? I only had a very quick one, Ken, which was, and I guess it's for Rhiannon really, is that as the schemes all roll out further and further, this particular recommendation will become even more important, won't it, to make sure that we've got a real handle on the value of what we're investing. So that's my only comment. Ruth, were you going to say something? Sorry, I interrupted you, I think.
Not particularly. I didn't have my hand up, but
sorry.
I'm glad to say something. I note these reports. I note those particular focus of them are really important issues, and they will no doubt feature on our ongoing watch list. But for the moment, I think they're helpful and noted.
Really pleasing, obviously, to have a substantial assurance as well. I know they do that very often, so well done to all. That's really, really good.
Okay. So the second report is the Medical Appraisal Revalidation System, or MARS. So the MARS system is an in-house development that is used to facilitate the revalidation process for consultants and GPs. The system had never been audited before, so we thought it was a good time to look at it. And we've really focused on the security and the resilience of the system, as well as how the system was operating. There were 6 findings, 1 high priority, 4 medium and 1 low, and these were mostly around the sort of system security and resilience of the system. All the findings, all the recommendations have been obviously accepted by management, and we provided reasonable assurance for this audit. So not much else to say really. If anybody's got any comments or questions, happy to take any questions.
Anybody got any questions?
None.
I mean,
Yes,
Heidi, sorry, the hand's hopeless on Zoom, isn't it? It fades into the background.
Sorry, yeah, it's just in terms of the MARS system, how assured can we be that it does what it's intended to do, which is assure us that doctors remain up to speed and working safely, I suppose. I know there's a discrepancy between primary and secondary care in what's included in MARS and the depth of information that's included. So I wonder, as an audit committee, how we assure ourselves that it does what it says on the tin.
Ken, do you want to, Paul, is your question on the same issue, or?
Sorry, it was on this paper. I wasn't going to comment about what Heidi's raised, but I will endeavour to. I will try and add a little bit of insight into that. I was just thinking about. So, as Ken rightly said, there's almost 2 halves to this review. One was looking at the sort of system controls and the IT side of things, but there are some components then which were looking more around the operational side of the MARS system. So just looking at some of the objectives which were talking about the adequacy of the trained appraisers and the responsible officers, and then the quality of that management information within the system. So I think there is a degree there that I think picks up some of those comments and those that assurance that you're looking for there. I'm not sure whether that answers it in full, but I think it was part of the brief that we were looking at. Whether you'd be looking for more is perhaps a slightly different question. Maybe it's a second conversation.
Ruth,
yes,
to come in on this.
Just a quick comment. It's a very valid point, and but for me it illustrates the importance of the interface with Education Committee. because this is starting to be an issue in the domain of clinical quality. And you know, Heidi and I, we've both done these systems, and we probably both got views about how they reflect, put it that way. And I'm sure at some point there's scope to explore that, perhaps through Education Committee as well. But it's an interface issue for me with audit, with AaGIC.
I think it is, and I guess it would probably be beyond the scope of that particular internal audit to assess the quality, but I think that's a valid point that should be perhaps referred from the audit committee, Ruth. I think unless Ken tells us otherwise, I think you probably didn't go as far as to assess the quality of the and as Heidi says, can we be assured that it's doing what it says?
No, we couldn't get into that. That was outside of the scope really. Didn't get a look at, you know, at detailed scripts and how people were, you know, what they were putting in the system. But maybe that's something we can build into another audit, maybe.
I think that's pretty fundamental. So I don't know if that's something that you do in other health bodies, but certainly it is pretty fundamental plank, isn't it, of the system. So perhaps you could take that away, and certainly Ruth, I think it would be very useful to do a further piece of audit work on that, as Heidi suggested.
Yeah, definitely. If there's any areas that are bothering people that we didn't cover this time, I think it would be good for us to maybe build something into the plan for next year.
Perhaps a short follow-up along those lines would be very helpful. And then, as you say, Ruth, it might be that it comes to the Education and Training Committee.
So just to clarify, what exactly are we asking the Education Committee to do, and what exactly are we asking internal audit to do? Because we're currently working on the plan for next year for internal audit in terms of the subject areas for their reports.
I think what we're saying is that the audit went so far, but it give us complete assurance on what the system is supposed to do. So we're asking internal audit if they could take that on board to give us that assurance. And it may or may not come back to the audit committee, depending on the edges, I guess, as Ruth has said. It may go to both, or it may just go to one or the other. I think it'll depend on the extent of the work.
Thank you.
Is that okay, Paul?
Yeah, we'll pick up a separate conversation if that's okay, just to make sure we're picking up the right things.
Yeah.
Could I just make one final? So
what exactly are you picking up then, Paul?
Sorry.
Just what piece of work are you therefore picking up?
Well, yeah, that's what we'll work out. We'll have that discussion to understand exactly and make sure we're understanding what's being said specifically.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for taking the time in the committee today. The only final thing I just wanted to say on that, just mindful of there was one high priority finding in the report that Cameron referred to. I'm just looking at the target date for that, and obviously that's actually next week. So I just want to flag up that it's good that the organisation management are looking to respond quickly to the high priority finding.
Yes, I was pleased to see that, I must admit, particularly since it's around security issues. Okay, I can't see any more hands, so thank you, Ken, that was very helpful. So we now, before I move on to Audit Wales, did you say we were expecting Jonathan at 11?
Yes, just before 11.
Okay, so it's 11:01, so I can't see him on the call. Shall we move on to Audit Wales, and if need be, obviously, we can perhaps pause if that's necessary. So perhaps if we move on to Audit Wales. Claire, are you going to lead us off here, or is Helen?
I will. Thank you, Chair. So we've got a few reports to bring to you today. Some have already been presented to board, so we can skim over. But it's first of all a summary of our work ongoing at the moment and where we are on our work in our update report. Broadly, I think Martin's covered where we are on accounts fairly well in terms of the dates so far, and Helen and team are working with Martin and team and Rhiannon in terms of hitting that 15th of July deadline. We've just started our planning. We would usually have our audit report to this audit committee. We're a little bit on the back foot this year on most of our audits, actually. We were a bit behind finishing off all last year, so we'll get that audit report to next audit committee, but we expect it to be ready before then, so we'll circulate it for information before the formal taking to audit committee once it's agreed. So you have sight of it as early as you can do. So probably nothing more to add in terms of accounts progress for now. Our performance audit update, our work from last year was broadly our structured assessment work, and that's all now complete. You had our phase 1 report, which looked at your operational planning arrangements last July, and our phase 2, which is about your broader arrangements in terms of governance, effective board and committee recovery planning and financial arrangements, went to the board on November, and that's on the agenda shortly, and I'll quickly talk through the main issues from that. We've also put on the agenda today Taking Care of the Carers report, which is set out in Exhibit 2 of our update report as well. This was an all Wales piece of work, drawing out themes and lessons on NHS wellbeing, and it's brought to you really so you consider the checklist and the recommendations as they apply to HEIW and think about what might apply to you. It's a broadly positive report, I think, with recommendations regarding keeping focus on staff wellbeing, thinking about it in your recovery plans and so forth, and we'll briefly touch on that shortly as well. Our local project for last year's audit, we may be subsuming into next year. And in Exhibit 3, I'll talk through our 2020 project, which is the annual review of annual commissioning arrangements. That is due to be drafted this month, so we expect that to come to next audit committee. Again, we talked about some delays in audit with internal audit, and we found the same in terms of this project as well, that we had to put back a few of our interviews to later on in the year, but we're nearly there on that report, and that should come to you in April. If I take you to Exhibit 3, you'll note obviously that the annual commissioning arrangements was actually our 2020 local project. We didn't actually scope out a 2021 project, but what we're looking to do and thinking about doing is, and we've had discussions with the Chair, CEO, Jill as well on this, and David, I'm sure we should be being in touch with you on it as well shortly, is looking at a piece of work on workforce planning, and that's cross Wales workforce planning. And that could be a significant piece of work, and it's linking it in as well with work across all the NHS bodies in the year as part of structured assessment in a thematic. So we're not just looking at what HEIW potentially is doing, we're linking it into what we see going on across the NHS as well, so linking the two together. So we'll look at the budget on that and scope it, and we may be using some of the budget from 2021 and subsuming it within 2022. Again, we'll come back to you once we've scoped it a little more. There could be a partial refund from 2021, and once we've scoped it and had a little bit more knowledge in terms of what we want to cover, we'll come back to you on that. But certainly we'll be looking to get a briefing together fairly shortly in terms of that project. Just going down from our update report, we've also as ever in the update report set out good practice events, GPX events and products that we have with links to those, and also any NHS national and related products as well in the update. So I'm happy to take questions on that update report before I move on to our next report, if there are any.
Any questions for Claire? I can't see any hands, Claire. I think that was fairly clear. So
lovely. Okay. Thank you, Jill. Well, the next report we bring to you is our phase 2 of our structured assessment, and this really looks at your board and committee arrangements, your recovery planning, your financial arrangements, and a bit on your risk assessment and risk arrangements as well. And it's a very positive report. We presented it to board, so I won't in November, so I won't go through it in any depth. But the key messages are very positive. We see you as a well-managed organisation with clear and effective arrangements to manage your finances as well. Again, I'll take any questions if you wish me to, if you have any for me, but I wasn't going to go into it in any more depth than that. It's, again, a very positive report for you. I think there's a couple of points we bring out in terms of improving and looking at quality management arrangements, but I think, you know, the organisation is on the case on that already and looking to improve quality management arrangements around training and education already. So yeah, just a few points in there, but very positive.
Yeah, it's very encouraging actually. It read really well, and so very pleased with it.
Good, thanks, Jill. And then the third report I've got you today is the Taking Care of the Carers report. And as I said, this is a Cross Wales report that we brought looking at how NHS bodies have been looking at the well-being, mental health and well-being of their staff throughout the pandemic. Obviously huge pressures on staff pre-pandemic, lots of additional pressures on staff through pandemic. So looking at the processes and procedures put in place and how effective they were in terms of staff well-being. I mean, generally, I think we found that across the board, bodies had looked to improve and enhance arrangements, and particularly looked to those staff at higher risk and the arrangements they would put in place to take care of and monitor the risk of those staff, particular staff at higher risk in terms of mental health or well-being, which was positive. There was a toolkit, an NHS Wales-wide toolkit which was put in place. Certainly there was a big disparity in terms of how much that toolkit had been used and its rollout, although I think there were some questions around how we can monitor that in terms of if staff completed it individually and how it was brought together in the centre. So there are some recommendations, generally broad recommendations across for all bodies to think about retaining this strong focus on staff well-being, considering workforce issues in their recovery plans, evaluating the effectiveness and impact of the wellbeing offer, and that's a difficult one, isn't it? Really difficult one to do, and also trying to enhance collaborative approaches to supporting staff wellbeing. So looking at what you can do across creating networks and so forth. And of course, HEIW in particular has a really strong role to play in that, and has had a really strong role to play in that as well. So important for you. Again, last couple of recommendations: continuing to provide assurance to boards and committees on what you're doing, and building on those local and national staff arrangements and looking at continued ways you can improve. So the checklist is with you and your staff at the moment, and I think it's coming back in terms of your responses to it and thoughts on it to the next audit committee.
Okay. Thank you, Claire, that's really helpful. And I thought it was a really, really good report actually, and read very well, very helpful. I had one comment, I guess, which you might expect me to make, which was it was a disappointment, I guess, that it didn't include social care. And I thought there was a bit of a missed opportunity to link health and social care in terms of the carers. So that was my only observation. I thought, you know, it was a real missed opportunity. So. But I understand why it was done that way, and I thought it was very good actually. Can I just pick up on something? Did you say, because I wanted to make sure the commissioning piece of work came to the April Audit Committee, that's on course, is it? To come?
Yes, it is. Yeah, we're hoping to draft it this month, by the end of the month in draft. So that should give us plenty of time to finalise by and bring it to April.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, any comments? Claire's, and then Heidi.
So did you see me, John? Or I didn't. Did you see me?
Yes, your hand's up, is it?
All I wanted to say very quickly was how much I welcome the Taking Care of the Carers paper. I thought it was really useful. When I was reading it, I kept coming back to thinking about HEIW's role in this, which is a different one to what the rest of the system will assume and to what they will take from the paper. I think they've got a special role in here, which is in some ways, well, it includes the clinical element, because we have obviously had staff who've been undertaking clinical roles during COVID, helping out. But there's also our role in fitting people to help others, to care for carers. And what for us is our spectrum of carers. Who are we talking about? We've got staff. Do we also include trainers who are training and caring for the trainees that they have? And do we include that through the arm of commissioning, or perhaps in some more direct? So it just raised for me a lot of new level of questions about our particular role in this, but it's very welcome, and thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Rue. Heidi?
Yes, I was delighted to see it. I think it's an excellent report. I especially like the checklist, because I think if you want to find out the impact of anything on your frontline staff, you really need to be asking your frontline staff, not the managers whose interest it is within saying everything's great. So I think that's really useful and really helpful.
And I'm pleased to see that it'll be coming back to the audit committee. That's really good news. So thank you, Claire. Thanks. So are we moving on now to the Audit Wales annual report?
Thanks, Jill. Should I take that?
Yes, fine. Yes, I wasn't sure if it was you or Helen. Yeah.
Yeah, so the annual audit report is really a summary of our work for the year. It summarises what we've done for the year in one place. And I suppose I'd probably still like to highlight that we are trying to continue to be flexible in our approaches and have tried to be so throughout the last year or two. But of course, ensuring we scrutinise you as we're required and try and provide, as we've done with taking care of the carers, try and provide insight where we can as well. So that continues to be our approach and will be throughout the next year or so. So in short, the annual report summarises our work on the accounts, and positive, of course, a clean, true and fair and regularity opinion on the account. So all was well. As we mentioned, the clinician's pension scheme earlier, and of course there was an emphasis of matter in the audit opinion. Again, not within your gift to change that. That's something the Auditor General has decided and taken a view on, and it's the same for most NHS bodies across Wales, and we'll monitor that and look at the impact on this year's accounts as we come into them. So all positive in terms of the financial statements, no concerns about your systems and controls, so a clean bill of health really in terms of those accounts. And then we set out our arrangements for ensuring and looking at your how you ensure economy and efficiency, effectiveness in your use of your resources. The key work we do on that, of course, is the structure assessment reports. We did 2, as I've talked about, phase 1 and phase 2, looking at operational planning this year in particular, because where you were in terms of COVID and moving quickly and trying to be agile in your planning. And then we looked at, again, the more usual board committee arrangements, financial arrangements, etc. later in the year. And again, as I've said, all fairly positive, a few learning points, but very positive indeed. We've also brought into the report the taking care of the carers and the broad arrangements we found as well. But again, very positive. It summarises what we've brought to you previously within the year. So I guess I'm not going to really dwell on the detail as you've had them and it's been reported to you already. But again, I'm very happy to take questions.
Thanks, Claire. Again, make great reading. You don't often get reports that are positive like this. So congratulations, I think, to everybody that did such a good job, and in particular under difficult circumstances. And obviously the relationship with audit seems to work very well. As you say, pleased to hear that it's open and transparent, and and seem to be helpful. So so I haven't got anything I want. There's nothing much to add to a positive audit report. So so are we happy to note that, Heidi, Ruth?
Yes, noted.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Claire, and thanks, Helen. Okay, apologies, Jonathan. We just wanted to finish the Audit Wales item. So welcome to the Audit Committee. Jonathan, I don't know if you know people here, but perhaps you'd just like to just say who you are and where you're from and the purpose, if you wouldn't mind. That'd be very helpful.
Yes, of course. Thank you. And good morning, everybody. So my name is Jonathan Irvine, and I'm the Director of Procurement Services for NHS Wales Shared Services Partnership. I was asked to attend the committee today just to provide an update on some internal restructuring that my division's taking forward. And we've just completed a staff consultation around that. So just wanted to give committee an overview of sort of the reasons for the review and restructuring and what the expected anticipated benefits are coming out of that. So I have a few slides if that's appropriate to share with colleagues, and then happy obviously to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, press on. Lovely.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just attempt to share my screen. So somebody could just let me know if that's visible. Yep, okay, thank you. Okay, so this is sort of coming towards the conclusion of what's almost a 12-month exercise, which has been undertaken with colleagues within my division in relation to what we're calling the National Operating Model for Procurement, which is simply a name to describe how we plan to refresh and update our structures moving forward, just to make sure that we are fit for the future. And as I said, we've been through quite an extensive engagement with staff at senior level and now more recently right through the division. So just to give colleagues an understanding, my division currently has in total just over 650 staff working in procurement, frontline teams, national contracting teams, and our logistics and transport operations. It's an all Wales service. I'm also actually responsible for the all Wales laundry services as well, which I was kindly given responsibility for last year. So total complement of staff is coming up close to 1,000. So, you know, it does take a bit of time to ensure that we do go through a proper consultation on any proposed changes to how we're going to operate. So just wanted to take colleagues through, as I said earlier, why we're doing this, what it means, and hopefully, you know, as I say, pick up any questions at the end. I think one of the things coming into post in 2019 that the pandemic did for me was to give me an accelerated picture of what worked really well within procurement nationally and locally, and where there were opportunities to further develop our service. I think through the lens of the pandemic, it really sort of emphasised to me the need to sort of make some changes to take advantage of our all Wales identity. And so I've listed here some of the reasons for the change. It's not change for change's sake, it's change to actually address some of these issues. We are an all Wales service, and I think that's why we want to further exploit where we can that all Wales identity. In doing so, I'm conscious that our national procurement activity can sometimes be not as closely aligned to our frontline operations within health boards, trusts and NHS organisations as it may be. And as a result, you know, we do potentially from time to time unintentionally work in a silo working arrangement, which I think is inevitable sometimes in terms of an organisation of this size. And we also recognise that because we've got national and local, as I call it, or frontline activity, there is a gap in the middle, which is how we undertake procurement and what the opportunities are to procure on a regional level within Wales, not just solely one or the other being national or or at an organizational level. And also, again, there is variation in practice in pockets throughout the division, and in terms of how we approach the market, how we engage with the market. And so really this is an opportunity to develop and roll out best practice across our teams in Wales. And as I said, eliminate process variation. We're also undergoing a parallel refresh and review of our arrangements with our supply chain, which is our logistics, warehousing and transport operations, where sort of the highlight there is the establishment of our national distribution centre through our facility anchoring it in Newport, which is IP5. And what we're trying to do here with the national operating model will have synergies across to what happens with the national distribution centre as well. So I'm trying to pull together the three main strands of procurement operation to try and integrate better and provide a better outcome for stakeholders. And finally, procurement is being directed as almost a magic wand in some ways to deliver on a number of programme for government initiatives for Welsh Government. So we've moved way beyond what would be traditionally seen as the procurement role. We've been asked now to look at opportunities to influence additional spend within the foundational economy in Wales. We've been tasked to deliver significant reductions in their carbon footprint. We've been asked to look at how we can help deliver on the social value agenda as well. So the landscape's changing, which again brings in a case for having to look and see, as our existing arrangements, the best they could possibly be to meet these challenges. So hopefully I've outlined there a snapshot of the reasons for a review. So on this, in terms of, we're not just doing this for the sake of doing it, what are the tangibles benefits that we expect to achieve on this? And bearing in mind that some of this is still subject to discussion and agreement with our senior teams on wider stakeholder engagement as well. But for each of the bullet points I've highlighted in red, sort of the key things that we need to touch on in terms of how do we know if this has been successful. We need to extend the influence where we don't currently have it across the non-pay spend profile of the NHS in Wales. There are areas of spend where procurement isn't involved and where we do need a procurement wrap around it. So that will be one of the key areas that we'll be looking at by examining each category of non-pay spend more collectively and more holistically, as you'll see. We are also being tasked to increase the range of outcomes or value-based procurement activity that we undertake. So it's not just about delivering goods and services, it's about procurement being used as part of the means by which patient outcomes and patients' experiences can be improved and enhanced. So it's not just about necessarily savings and meeting specification, which is important obviously, but it's part of a wider patient pathway almost. And there's areas we have been working in, but in isolation and in pockets. So I need to extend that across the teams right across Wales. Again, we need to increase the number of compliant contracts and opportunities that we take to the market to ensure that we increase the compliant expenditure and reduce the what we call non-catalogue, non-contract spend within each of the organisations, including HEIW. And we can't forget that moving into next financial year in particular, with everything else, we have and will have an increased savings delivery target more undoubtedly with each of the orgs. We understand and we know the funding allocations that health boards, trusts and orgs have been provided. And we're already aware of what the pressure on the SIP is going to be, which always translates into a pressure on our teams to deliver further savings on non-pay spend. I've mentioned the targets we've been set for increasing spend within the foundational economy, and those targets are likely to be set again for further improvement next year as well. So that's increasing the value of spend that we undertake with Welsh-based suppliers and contractors. And I've also mentioned that we're also expected to contribute to the NHS net zero target for carbon footprint. Procurement has been identified as contributing towards 60% of the NHS carbon footprint. So again, you can imagine there's a lot of focus coming on the activity of my teams across Wales to show how we can reduce our carbon footprint, both internal supply chains and also the external supply chains of how we get goods and services into Wales and what sorts of goods and services we're bringing in as well. And as you can appreciate, we're working with a wide number of stakeholders on that agenda. Mentioned the National Distribution Centre that we're developing, and we're also rolling out what's called Scan for Safety, which is barcode scanning system for all products that come into Wales, scanning them in from point of entry across the border right through the supply chain and linking them up directly with the patient in the operating theatres, for instance, within the hospital setting. That's already starting to be implemented across Wales, received ministerial approval last year to proceed following a significant procurement. And once deployed, it will be the first national scan for safety system that I'm aware of in Europe. So it really puts Wales at the forefront of that area of work, which is ultimately designed to improve patient safety and reduce the amount of never events that potentially could happen. And it will also feed into what we're calling our nationally stocked product range within the National Distribution Centre. It's only one point on this slide, but the next point is a massive piece of work for us, and it continues to be, which is our ongoing COVID response. So, you know, my teams are responsible in most high profile at the minute for the delivery of the vaccination programme and the distribution of vaccines across Wales. We're directly engaged with the booster programme as we speak. We also manage full PPE provision for NHS Wales and social care and primary care settings. And we were also involved in a lot of COVID response procurement activity in terms of services and other products that were needed. That continues in the background and takes up a lot of time. So the headcount I mentioned at the start, which was just over 650 staff, has flexed by well over 100 staff since the start of the pandemic to that level. So always have to remember that that's where we're operating against that backdrop. And one of the things that we hope to be able to do is to allocate expert staff resources that we have internally to relevant areas and stakeholders. So where there's specialists in certain types of procurement, we want to line those up directly with the relevant stakeholders who operate in those areas of spend predominantly. And what's maybe just dropped off the end is that one of the things that we will do, we need to measure our success on this. So we'll be moving swiftly into baselining against each of those areas to hopefully be able to demonstrate how we can develop KPIs around those and demonstrate that what we're doing is delivering on these areas. And we agreed some principles here with the staff across Wales that instead of having multiple people looking at multiple different arrangements within a category of spend, so a category of spend, for instance, could be provisions or it could be medical and surgical, that we would have one single sourcing strategy per category that would develop so that we remove duplication and we again consolidate where we can, but basically, you know, get the optimum position in terms of the spend within the category and the interventions that we're making from a procurement perspective. And that brings into play then two specific arrangements that we're putting into place through this national operating model, which is the second and third bullet point. We're developing what we're calling a number of partnerships between existing national sourcing teams and our local frontline teams. Remove that element of silo working, remove that element of duplication, and have greater engagement between the two. It's not about one taking the other over or absorbing the other. It's about a partnership between them working together. Where all of the spend is currently going through the national contracting arrangements, and we'll come on to those, we're keeping those teams as solely standalone because there's no spend or very limited spend on those categories going through locally. We've decided to keep those as national teams in their own right and not partnering them up directly with any particular frontline team. There is some transactional procurement work and other locally provided services that are impacted. But the general principle is that staff will follow the work that they're currently undertaking. So for stakeholders such as yourselves, you should see very much minimal disruption in terms initially of the staff who you're used to dealing with. What you will have is an enhanced support for those staff and enhanced resource working alongside them to develop this best practice and a standardized approach to how we take products to the market. And we're underpinning this with the agile working arrangements that currently exist, and hopefully, you know, if we move into a future hybrid model of working, that will help us also embed this approach. So just a couple more slides then to really show you what the new the proposed teams are looking like. I mentioned there the national, what we call standalone teams. who will continue to provide a standalone national service. You can see them in bold there. Medicines management will remain as national, not linked up to any particular team. The vast majority of medicines management procurement is going through the national contracts and is handled by our pharmacy colleagues anyway. ICT, we're expanding just to include the office equipment so that E-class code, that category is fully covered. And we will continue to work alongside HEIW on ICT procurement. And then I suppose most importantly for colleagues possibly in this call is commissioning, which is currently a national standalone category. We're extending the scope of commissioning to cover additional services and additional activity, both outsourcing and insourcing of clinical services, which is very much going to be needed to support NHS reset and recovery, and HEIW sourcing requirements as well. Again, we have what I would call definitely experts in the area of commissioning and services commissioning, and that's been quite a key part of your spend portfolio. We decided to formally integrate that into the commissioning work. And as you know, probably a number of our national commissioning staff have already worked successfully. Hopefully you'll see it successfully alongside your colleagues already. And we're adding professional and admin services to that portfolio as well. And finally, again, on my screen anyway, slightly dropped off the bottom, we've created a new standalone category and we've separated out energy. Given the strategic importance profile, cost pressures to say the least around the energy portfolio, and the fact that we operate exclusively off an all Wales arrangements here for fully green energy, we've decided just to give energy the focus we feel it deserves rather than what it is currently, which is part of the national non-clinical team. So we split that out just to give it that emphasis. Then the integrated partnerships I mentioned, where we're linking our national colleagues in more closely with our frontline teams. We've on the left-hand side of this slide, you'll see the areas of spend that we've gathered together because there's commonality between the areas. And so that we start to pull together similar areas of spend and sort of bring into play then the national teams who are more experienced in some of those areas, and link them up alongside either where they naturally sit geographically or where there's other rationale for bringing people together. So in the north, we already have our medical and clinical team nationally based in the BCU area alongside the frontline team for BCU. So we're consolidating and adding to the portfolio there and bringing those two teams more closely together. And you'll see that Welsh Blood Services, for instance, will also be added to that portfolio. In the south, you'll see medical consumables. Again, the medical consumables team generally sits in the south. And there's read across to work that Cardiff and Vale frontline team are already undertaking nationally on neuro and renal products and PPE. And then there's a close link across between Cardiff and Vale as a health board and Velindre, particularly the likes of cancer services. And so the Cardiff and Vale and Velindre teams will merge as such. So the Velindre frontline staff will move across to work alongside the Cardiff and Vale staff. And we'll also look after the procurement for my own organisation, which is shared services. A lot of the non-clinical activity, we're linking up the national contracting staff with our team and our frontline team in Anar and Bevan, and you can see the various categories there, which are interlinked around a lot of the facilities and supporting products and services that are needed for the operation of the health boards. And finally, in the south to southwest, we're linking our existing Swansea Bay frontline teams and Hull Da frontline teams more closely together. Capital, in particular maintenance, is already cited nationally at Swansea Bay. So we're linking capital in with that from the national perspective, because capital and maintenance should go hand in hand, and provisions as well, because there's a real push in the southwest and the west to have more of an emphasis from a foundational economy around the spend for provisions and making sure that we try where we can to encourage more local economy spend in the area of food. So those are the teams. Final slide here is just our next steps. The staff consultation ended last Monday, 31st of January. This week we'll be issuing out the final structures to staff and staff side representatives. with a view to really starting the transition towards what we've just reviewed there, from next week onwards through a series of staff engagement workshops, as well as stakeholder engagement workshops. We are taking a slight pause because obviously year end, as for a lot of people, is a massively busy period of time for our teams across Wales, particularly frontline teams. And then we'll be looking to sort of embed and as I call it, settle this structure into shape starting from April onwards then, with the first health check and see how it's performing from June 2022 this year onwards. So that's really all I had to run through with colleagues, and I'll just hand back to Chair and say happy to take any questions, and I'll stop sharing my screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. That was really, really helpful, and a lot of the stuff on those slides I wasn't aware of, so it's really good to see what's going on and the expected benefits. I'll open it up for any questions to Jonathan. Stunned everybody into silence. Ruth.
Thank you, Jo. I've got a very odd picture on my screen now, don't it? Is it of other people? Or have you gone back to normal?
Back to normal.
Oh, right, must be here. I just wanted to, well, first of all, to welcome the presentation and all the work that's, and this is obviously a very substantial piece of initiative, if you like, or initiative, and very interesting. I just want to pick up 2 points. One is to ask what's happening in the other UK countries. Do we have any interface with England, for example, or any of the others in our commission, particularly in relation to what they're currently doing in terms of developing or changing the way they approach services? And the other question or point was to welcome the proposal to increase the focus on outcomes and value-based procurement. And I noticed that specific KPIs are going to be developed. And I just really wanted to ask about that because I think that's quite a challenging area. And it will be helpful to know how that proceeds as it goes forward. But thank you very much. I will try and amend the rather bizarre pictures I have of you all. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ruth. So on the first point in terms of collaboration, yes, we do collaborate widely across all of the other 3 nations. I've regular, and some of my senior team have regular reviews and meetups with our colleagues in Northern Ireland and Scotland. So from a wider perspective, I'm sure some of you have already guessed, my background is very firmly in health and social care in Northern Ireland, where I spent a lot of my career. This model has similarities to how procurement is arranged in Northern Ireland, and that's an opportunity to really make the most collective approach of what is also there a national procurement organisation. I know in Scotland as well, it's relatively similar. There are nuances here which I've adopted just simply for Wales. In respect of the more specific issue around collaboration for services, it's not something we've really progressed so far. At the minute, you may not be aware, you may be aware there's a series of procurement reforms undergoing reviews with the UK government as well as Welsh government input into that. And the differences in terms of healthcare services provisions each side of the English-Welsh border are significant to the point that we need to look at how those reforms will reflect those variations. But in general terms, Ruth, yes, we do collaborate where we can, and it's probably going to be a feature of what we do moving forward is collaborate. One of the things I'm a great believer in, might regret saying this, but it's not just all Wales all the time just for the sake of it. We should only have an all Wales approach to procurement if that's what benefits stakeholders and ultimately our patient population. if there's a benefit or an outcome which is better served by utilising an English arrangement or a collective collaborative procurement arrangement, then that's certainly what we should be working into these sourcing strategies. So that's certainly my approach for better or worse. In terms then of your second question, Ruth, about the addressing the outcome-based measures and value-based measures, that's an ongoing conversation that we're having. You know, so for example, a contract that's recently been awarded for Wales, which we were involved in, was the All Wales Clinical Robotics Services for colorectal and urology surgery, and that was very much predicated around clear KPIs demonstrating how these robots will improve patient outcomes. And there's a range of different measures there. We can transfer those into any setting and tailor those to get, you know, in conjunction with the stakeholders. So it's really, in my view, working back, what is it we're trying to deliver for the end user, whether that be a patient or an internal client, understanding what they're looking for and developing measures as to how that will be demonstrated. So I think it is an ongoing work in progress, but one that's going to become more and more important. So I'm not sure if that's, yeah.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jonathan. That's really helpful. Heidi?
Thank you, Jonathan. That's great. I just wondered, you talked about partnerships, and I understand that's partnerships with health boards, trusts. Do you have partnerships directly with clusters? We're talking about an agile procurement, and is that in the plan?
So when you say clusters, Heidi, what do you mean? Sorry, just so I'm clear.
GP clusters, so individual GPs practices are together in 5 clusters across Wales and are responsible for commissioning services, I suppose, for their patient populations. And I wondered how procurement works in that. Is it via the health board or is it via the clusters directly?
No, those will usually be through the health boards and led through that. Again, I think it's another area we need to look at without getting too ambitious. But generally speaking, the primary care element of the work would be what we do in that regard through health board requirements rather than dealing directly with primary care contractors. The only caveat to that has been through the pandemic where we deal directly with the primary care contractors and the likes of PP and things like that. But in terms of commissioning services and so on, that it's not something we deal directly with at this point in time.
Okay, thank you.
Good question though, Heidi. I was thinking about community services more widely and how that fitted. So just a couple very quick ones from me. I don't want to prolong the stay, Jonathan. I suppose it's slightly controversial, which is I've seen an awful lot of attempts to do a national procurement service for Wales for a number of years, too many to recall. So the first question is about compliance and how will you ensure that that you get the compliance to get the benefits. And then the second question, which is always the one that's raised, is it's taken me 2 months to get a pencil that I could have, nipped over the road and bought very easily and cheaper. And I guess that's one of the biggest barriers. So how would you, so you probably haven't got time to go into the answer on that, but the agility, the speed and the price will be, for me, the critical PIs of it.
Sure. So in terms of the first question, Jill, the compliance issue is, already something that we can easily get a handle on. I think, again, it's coming back to this issue that we have one financial management system in Wales, Oracle, which is a real help. We've one route to the market, which is our online tendering system, Bravo. And we have one procurement service, which I'm now trying to homogenize, if I could use that word, into a sort of a more unitary function. And I think those elements together will in themselves ensure that we increase compliance around the spend that we have, and that we have, even more visibility of what we're doing. And obviously there's lots of different detail within that as to how we would do that and what techniques and tools we would use to drive that. And then in terms of the second point, I think it's a really good point around speed of procurement. I think that's one of the potential risks whenever you deal with a large procurement organization, that it can tend to slow things down. Introduction of technology such as I mentioned, Scan for Safety, will definitely increase speed of procurement, because you scan barcodes, for instance, in certain settings, and the order will go straight through. We've also, with our National Distribution Centre, we'll be starting to bring into stock as a national stock range for the first time ever. You know, Wales deserves and should have a national warehouse, the same as Scotland, the same as Northern Ireland and parts of England. And the nationally stocked product range will be another quick and easy route to market. And finally, generally, notwithstanding what I've just said, the amount of what we call non-catalogue spend that currently exists, where it's high compared to what's on catalogue, we have to reduce that and switch it across. Once it's on catalogue, then you should swiftly be able to just order from point of requirement those products on the catalogue. So there's a number of different ways we're seeking to approach that and address that issue that you quite rightly raise.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. And I think we look forward to hearing more, I think, in the future, certainly about how it's rolled out, and as Ruth said, some of the KPIs for the service. So thank you ever so much. Can't see any more hands, but it's been really, really useful this morning. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Nice to meet everybody, and I'm happy to come back at any point in the future. So please just ask. I'll drop off now, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Okay, thank you. Back to the agenda. The procurement compliance report, I think, is next on the agenda. Is this Rhiannon or Christine, or both?
I'm happy to introduce Christine, who I think is on the call, who will take us through the detail of this.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
So, sorry, Rhiannon, I thought you were going to say something else then, so apologies. Yeah, I'll pick up. Okay, the report, obviously, that you've got before you covers the period for 24th of September to the 17th of July. On this occasion, it also includes 2 additional items, one being the correction to the previous report for the Tracy Myhill Associates STA, but also the progress on the process improvement plan, of which there's only one remaining action outstanding. The report in itself doesn't actually contain any major concerns. Just running through the report and looking obviously at the key issues, they are, as I've just mentioned, and the report is presented for noting. In terms of, I'll come back to the kind of standard reports if I deal with the kind of 2 exceptional issues first, if that's okay with you, Chair. Okay, so the first one being obviously the Tracy Myhill Associates. The question obviously that we had back was how do we prevent the issue of missing an STA in future, and ensuring obviously that all appropriate items are reported. What we've done in terms of obviously reviewing the process, on this particular occasion, what we identified was that despite the checks that are undertaken as standard, unfortunately the error had happened at the register stage, and of course we rely on the register to make sure that that's our kind of holy grail, if you like, of all of the activity. Unfortunately, as we mentioned previously, it was missing off the register. So what we will do now as standards is incorporate a further step of checks further back in the process, whereby we'll be checking against all of the actual file notes and STAs that are in the file to make sure that there isn't actually anything missing. In terms of the procurement process improvement plan itself, Appendix 3 actually refers to a single outstanding activity. So I'm happy for finance colleagues to jump in here in terms of, we've had our second quarterly review, and obviously we're finding our feet with these sessions in terms of what we want from them in terms of value, what they tell us about our performance. And obviously going back to Jonathan's comment in terms of KPIs, that they will continue to evolve. We've had in that time about 3 bi-monthly meetings. I think we're due for another one next month, Martin. And obviously, again, we're kind of finding our feet, discussing topical issues. We were finding certain areas of the service that are under pressure, and identifying obviously who needs most support. So they're also working well. And they also include colleagues from our central sourcing team as well, which, as you've just heard, that will actually be a single team going forward, which is obviously going to be very welcome for us all, I'm sure. So in terms of the procurement compliance report in Appendix 3, there is only one action outstanding now, which is the actual setup of the clinics, procurement clinics. And what we're hoping by setting up those clinics, there'll be open sessions. We've just got colleagues looking at the tech side of it, because we want them as genuine drop-in sessions. But whereas before we would have done them on site where people can just come up to, you know, an open area and ask for advice, we need to make sure that they do work in a virtual environment as well. Those are intended to be fully up and running by the end of March. So that's the main outstanding action. And I think probably for me, that's one of the biggest ones in terms of removing some of the barriers, but also alleviating some of the pressure in emails, action points, you know, repeat chaser queries, because at least that way we'll be able to deal with it up front, as opposed to people feeling that they can only work in this kind of email environment, which isn't, you know, it's not something that we prefer for sure. Rhiannon, sorry, I've just seen your hand go up.
Yeah, sorry, if it was okay, Chair, I was just going to come in and say that sort of I've been working with Jonathan and Christine and the local team on the ground, because although this is a change in terms of our support from the procurement team, I think most of the people that business units on the ground are used to dealing with will remain the same, but there may be some slightly different communication channels. So we've got to work through those as now the consultation is finished. You know, we can work through exactly how that communication is going to be managed in the future to make sure that, you know, everybody within HEIW understands who they're dealing with and who they can speak to for support from the procurement team. So that's a paper that I'm due to take back through the exec team in the next couple of weeks, just to set that out clearly and get the communication out through the organisation.
Thanks, Rhiannon. Thank you. Christine, have you completed your one?
What we've actually got then is just reverting back to the standard compliance report in Appendix 1. So if I just move on to that one now. Okay, so just running through, I'll come back to the Tracy Myhill Associates one, if I may, in the closed session, because there's some comments there. I think probably more appropriate because we've put it into the closed session that they continue. Overall, what I would say is, whilst a lot of these are, the majority are first submissions, and again, that's been checked, but there are some where, for instance, this one is stated as a first submission for Amberwing. I've just realised actually I'm not sharing my screens, but I'm on Amberwing, which is the second page of Appendix 1. There has been prior expenditure, but it wasn't under an STA, and it was also below 5k. So what the team are doing is, you know, as has been requested in other audit committees now, is that we put together the consolidated spend, just to make sure that from a compliance and best value perspective that we are looking at it on an aggregated basis, not an individual basis. There are some quite high value ones in here, however, they have all been scrutinised. Particularly what we've been doing with the high value ones is making sure that we are liaising with our central sourcing colleagues who actually deal with the bigger university contracts. I think it's fair to say certainly there's a number on here for the pharmacy team. The pharmacy team, as many of us know, has been going through a programme of change. So for them, it's a particularly challenging time in terms of the national changes that are coming through in terms of the accredited qualifications and what's required of them. But also they've got to make sure that we've got run-out agreements to make sure that the students coming through right now are still supported. What we obviously wouldn't want to do at this stage is commit to a very long-term arrangement, knowing that that programme is going to change. because it may not necessarily be the same providers that actually submit the bids for those particular programmes. So again, they've all been scrutinised, and obviously one of the things that we focused on particularly over the last couple of months is making sure that the work plans actually tie, and that there is a wider awareness across the procurement service of when these bigger agreements need to be renewed. So just going through further, again, unless anybody has any specific concerns, as I said, these are scrutinised on an individual basis, not as a group, because we can't always say for sure if one issue applies to all of pharmacy, and that's definitely not the case. They're all very much taken on their own merits. The one, for some reason, it's not presenting clearly on my screen. There's been a couple of change notes, again, that they're not an issue. And there was one issue that was dealt with as a file note. But again, just because something is a file note doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. On this particular occasion, the file note was presented for 6,000. Originally, the expenditure was below 5k. But again, through the scrutiny that we apply, monitoring of the orders, backtracking and making sure that the competition processes are appropriate and supportive, obviously, of the orders that we're placing. That is, it's a reflection of our due diligence in that sense. And each and every one of these are discussed at length with the service as to whether it was perhaps somebody not being quite as aware what we'd like them to be of the procurement rules, or whether it's a case that, again, single tender actions, they're not a waiver from the procurement rules or the SFIs. They are included in the SFIs as an appropriate course of action. So I'm not sure if anyone has any specific questions on any particular items.
Anybody got any questions for Christine? I just got a couple I wanted to pick up, Christine. I guess we know that we've had some issues in terms of a couple of contracts outside of this particular report. So I guess my question on the improvement plan is, can the committee be completely assured that we've cracked everything, as it were, in terms of any issues? And second, I think you've pretty much covered nearly all my questions, but yes, there's a lot of pharmacy ones in there. Two, there seem to be an awful lot of single tender actions, really, but maybe that's just my perception. And three, this business of getting a quote under 5k for the first submission and then moving on to a second submission, I would just like somebody to keep a very close eye on that, because it's something that I've seen elsewhere, and I think we've got to be mindful of value for money and competition, and I'm just a bit nervous because we have got a lot of unique, probably, as you say, courses, etc., but just to make sure that we're covering ourselves. So I don't want to prolong the discussion. So those are my observations, really. So I don't know if you can just pick up those quickly.
Yeah, certainly. On I guess the point about regional that Jonathan made, I think this is probably a really good example, because we are dealing with specialist qualifications as well. What we are looking at is in terms of not just all Wales delivery, but regional delivery, to make sure that across Wales we've got different demographics, if you like, and different universities capable of meeting those needs. And in some areas we've got no university capable of meeting the need, which means we have to then look at blended learning, different types of approaches. So I think certainly as we get more develop the organisation, obviously one of the things we've certainly noticed in the last 12 to 18 months is how the organisation certainly found its feet in terms of its plans, what it's looking to achieve, and that obviously has increased the workload and the presence of the procurement service. Just going back to the sheer volume of STAs, I think this is probably where, I know we're talking back to 2018, which seems like a long time, but actually in contractual terms, it's not actually that long. A lot of these agreements may still be the first time that we're seeing them for renewal, but also coming out of the university sector into the NHS. Of course, in the NHS, they're not considered as SLAs, whereas they may have been before. So contractually, we have to treat them differently. So those are the types of conversations, obviously, that we're having in the bi-monthly meetings and so on, in terms of, okay, well, who's got what coming up? What is part of the annual commissioning plan? What is part of business as usual? So I think it's fair to say still a lot to do. And, you know, we will address these issues as and when they arise with finance colleagues and also with operational service leads as well.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Thanks. Okay, I can't see any further questions, so thank you very much, Rhiannon and Christine, for that. Obviously, it's something that the committee are taking a keen interest in, as you know. So I'm conscious that we are moving on in terms of time, so perhaps we turn to Nigel now and the counter fraud progress report.
Thank you. The key points from the report really are that we've done so far 37 days of the allocated 50 days for HEIW, so we're well on track to complete the full allocation of days that we've said we would do. Now that we've, I'll update on resources in a minute. We've done 2 awareness sessions, but the induction process and training sessions again started for HEIW, so we'll be doing more fraud awareness input with those linked into with the inductions. The risk assessment we're running on the checks carried out by employment agencies before they provide staff to HEIW, that's continuing. Should be complete and presenting a report on that for the next audit committee. The resources, as you know, we've been struggling for a while. We've now appointed an accredited counter fraud investigator. He's an ex-police officer, but he's actually started his NHS accreditation training today. It runs for a week and it's spread over a 3-month period, is a week each month. So by the start of the financial year, we will have in place a fully accredited local counter fraud specialist. As far as the manager role is concerned, that went out to advert and the interviews for that post are happening this Friday. And that's pretty much it really. We're liaising with Martin, the fraud champion. We arrange monthly meetings now to get together and discuss how we can work together and provide a service for HEIW. There's no system weaknesses to report for this particular period. There are no active investigations for HEIW. And that's it really as far as the counter fraud situation is concerned. And then the next task for me now is to have Rhiannon nominated with the Counter Fraud Authority as the Director of Finance for HEIW, and then we're all should be up and running. But happy to take questions on anything of the report.
Any questions for Nigel? I just had a couple of quick ones, Nigel. First one was who's our fraud champion that's mentioned in the report, and the second is what are we doing with the 15 days that are assigned to investigation in the absence of any investigations?
Martin Pennell is a fraud champion. Now
apologies, Martin.
The days that are allocated for investigations, this is something I wanted to do, well, if not me, certainly the new counter fraud manager, once they are in place, is to have a meeting with Rhiannon and sit down and look at the structure of these days and how they're allocated. Because as far as I understand, this format has been in place for many years and not been tinkered with. I didn't want to tinker with it as a sort of, because I'm in here as a temporary measure at the moment. So when somebody is permanently in place as a manager, then I think it would be valuable to meet with the Director of Finance and sit down and say, okay, these are the days that have been allocated to HEIW. How do you think you could best utilize them? As you know, we rarely get, fortunately for the organization, rarely get any referrals for HEIW. So it seems to be a bit wasted. And there are other issues as well with the National Fraud Initiative. That's not an annual event. It comes around every 2 years. So there are days allocated perhaps there that could be perhaps moved onto another section and better used. But that's a discussion to have, I would think, when when the manager is in permanent place.
Okay, so we've obviously got 15 days for this year. So will they be utilised before the end of March?
Yes, it will, because the risk assessment is taking up quite a lot of time because we're dealing with the different agencies and third parties again. So it is taking up quite a lot of time. But they certainly will be used, yes. And presentations as well. Presentations are being increased, so the days will be used.
Okay, perhaps for the next audit committee, you can give us a flavour of what they were used for. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Nigel. I can't see any further hands up. So if we move on then to the information governance part of the agenda, and welcome to a regular visitor, Sian, our Director of Digital. Welcome, Sian, and thank you for attending on your regular slot. So we've got the key issues report and then the updates. So who's going? Are you doing them both, Sian?
No, I'll be picking up the key issue report and I'll be presenting it in Welsh. So hopefully Hugh is on the line and everything's working well. So adroddiad ar faterion allweddol a draddodwyd yn y cyfarfod diwethaf o'r grŵp Llywodraethu Gwybodaeth a Rheoli Gwybodaeth, neu AaGIC, ar yr ail o 15 o Ionawr. Papur i'w nodi mwyn sicrwydd ydy hon. Mae crynodeb o'r cyfarfod yn llawn i gael yn y papur. Nai symud gyntaf i drafodaeth a gafwyd ar rhyddid gwybodaeth. Yn ystod cyfnod yr adroddiad, derbynwyd 7 cais rhyddid gwybodaeth ac llwyddwyd i ymateb bob un o'r rhain o fewn yr amser penodedig. Gyfynwyd ein bod ni ail-edrych ar un o'r ymatebion ymlaethwyd i'r cais rhyddid gwybodaeth ac wedyn ni ymchwilio i fewn i'r mater i wnaethon ni cadarnhau ein penderfyniad gwreiddiol. Da ni hefyd wedi derbyn hysbysiad gan yr ICO i bod nhw wedi derbyn cwyn ynghylch ag un ymateb a rhoddwyd i cais rhyddid gwybodaeth ac mae'r ICO wedi cadarnhau i bod nhw'n chwilio i fewn i hyn ymhellach. Cafwyd hefyd diweddariad ar chwarter 2 ar gynllun cyflawni a gweithredu Llywodraeth Gwybodaeth ac wrth gwrs mae hynny yn fater y bydd Sian yn cyflwyno arni mewn eiliad. Felly gloi papur i'w nodi ydy hon a dwi'n hapus i dderbyn unrhyw cwestiwn sydd gan y pwyllgor.
Thank you, Javed. Diolch. Any questions? No? Okay. Shall we move on to the toolkit then? Thank you, Javed.
Yeah, thank you. The paper provides the summary, the ongoing quarterly summary that we've been providing to Audit Committee on our plans and progress for our submission to the IG toolkit. As the paper describes, we had actions that were deliverable for quarter 2 and those now working towards quarter 4. We've made good progress in the period with 2 of the red actions from last time's report having been dealt with. But unfortunately, we've gained a new red one, which is the information sharing agreement with health boards. Whilst this is disappointing to be a red, I think it also demonstrates the scrutiny that we're putting ourselves under from this kind of IG and an overall perspective. Is this was taken to the All Wales IG meeting at which the ICO was represented. And whilst they recognised the good work, it required a further level of detail. So that work is now being worked through, and that's the reason we've decided it to red, because we haven't quite completed it in the timescale, as opposed to the approach being wrong. So it's that external scrutiny that's got us to that point. Overall, then, we are in a strong position with 63 greens, 12 ambers, and the 1 red. And the team continue to work well, and we are confident of achieving an improved position of our previous reporting of 0. Whether we will hit the 1 or the 2 will be dependent, because it's like some other audits, unless you hit every single mark spot on, you could fail on almost half of a sentence, and then you fail the whole level. So that's the process now that as a team we're working through, and continue to work, report that back through IGIM and this group then for the position at the end of quarter 4.
Thank you, Sian. It's very helpful. Any questions? I mean, from a personal point of view, I'm really pleased to note the progress. I mean, there's been huge, significant progress on this, and I guess my question really was, and this seems grossly unfair in terms of failing on one, so you fail the whole thing. Will the All Wales sharing issue, you know, sort of trip us up, as it were, and not allow us to get the progress we want?
It may be an area. I think we will achieve the level. I'm hopeful we will be level 1. The devil will be in the detail of the level 2. I'm a bit reluctant to commit either way at the moment. But what I think we can demonstrate to Audit Committee is significant progress and a much robust process now of assurance. And actually, I think some of this detracts from the business as usual, and that's increasing because the messages out there about involving IG and involving early. So again, that's creating more work for the team as well, which is a good outcome of this piece of work.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Sian. Ruth?
Just to add a very warm welcome to this work, as an awful lot has gone on since the standing start, and obviously more to do. But thank you for where you've got to, and it's very welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I think continuous improvement on this one is definitely the direction of travel.
Thank you very much, Sian. It's really good. So we'll let you get back to your business as usual now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming to the Audit Committee.
Bye.
Okay. We note the progress. Sorry, David, I'm not very good at telling everybody what we're doing. So we're noting the progress.
We note those reports.
Yeah, thank you. So moving on to the risk register, the corporate risk register.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Cadeirydd. Mae papur on y papur nodi, ond mae hefyd yn gofyn ein bod ni bod y Pwyllgor yn awdurdodi bod yr risgiau sydd wedi asesu'n wyrdd yn dod oddi ar y gofrestr. Felly mae yna cyfanswm o 10 risg ar y gofrestr ar hyn o bryd, ac o'r rhain mae 1 yn goch, 8 yn amber ac 1 wyrdd. O ran y risg sydd wedi asesu'n goch, mae hynny yn ymwneud gyda seibr diogelwch, a mae bydd y Pwyllgor yn gyfarwydd iawn y risg yna. O ran y risgs amber, mae 1 risg wedi asesu yn amber sydd yn newydd, a mae hynny'n ymwneud gyda'r gyhurio yn y broses yn y broses caffael ar gyfer y system rheoli addysg tŷ-dysgu. Mae Pwyllgor wedi ystyried hynny yn barod. A beth sy'n nodi fy yma ydy y ffaith bod y broses caffael wedi cael ei hirio, bod yna risg felly bydd hynny'n cael effaith andwyol ar elfennau eraill o'r amcanion sydd wedi cael yn yr IMTP. O ran yr 1 risg sydd yn werth, mae hynny yn ymwneud â ar wasanaethau'r gwasanaeth iechyd, a'r ffaith i fod yn gallu tarddu ar cyfleoedd ar gyfer lleoliadau, ar gyfer myfyrwyr a hyfforddeuon. Ond da ni bellach wedi asesu bod y risg yma wedi digwydd ac i bod yn cael ei ystyried fel rhywbeth sydd yn rhan anatod o gwaith gwasanaeth iechyd bellach. Felly, da ni'n ystyried yn wyrdd ac yn gofyn i'r Pwyllgor i dynnu oddi ar y gofrestr felly. Felly, i gloi Cadeirydd, papur i'w nodi ar y cyfan, ond hefyd yn gofyn bod risg rhif 16 sydd wedi cael ei asesu'n wyrdd yn dod oddi ar y gofrestr wrth gwrs yna.
Thank you, David. I can't see any hands, and I think, Ruth?
Only just to support that, and I support it being removed from the risk register. I understand the history behind this and the context, and I think it's sensible to remove it.
Yeah, thank you. Just a point of process, I guess. David. We took this in some detail at the board. Are we out of sync on the risk register or not with the audit committee?
No, it's so they're both the same versions of the risk register. We've now changed the process for considering the risk register at board level. So it's provided for information at every meeting of the board, where previously it was only taken once every 6 months. And consequently, the cover paper that you'll see for the board, because the board is meeting once every 2 months, the cover paper compares the version of the risk register that was last seen by the board 2 months ago. The audit committee sees it every 3 months, and consequently the cover paper compares and highlights the differences when the audit committee last saw the risk register 3 months before. And the audit committee also has the additional function of being able to take the green recommendations off the register. So those are the key differences. So while the content of the risk register that you saw at the end of January is the same as this version, the cover paper is different for the reason.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I won't prolong the conversation on that. Perhaps we can have a conversation on another time. So is everybody, Ruth's already indicated. Heidi, are you happy that we take the green risk off register? Yes. And note the updated risk register?
Yes, that's fine.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, so moving on, David, to the audit recommendations tracker.
Thank you. Diolch yn fawr iawn, Cadeirydd. Felly papur ydy hwn ar y system tracio argymhellion. Ar hyn o bryd mae 26 o argymhellion ar y system tracio. O'r rhain mae 25 argymhelliadau wedi bod o archwilio mewnol, a dim ond un o archwilio allanol. Felly os yna ni gymryd yr archwilio mewnol yn gyntaf, ar hyn o bryd mae 25 argymhelliad sydd wedi dod o'r archwilio mewnol, ac o'r rhain mae 13 wedi asesu'n wyrdd, a felly bod ni'n gofyn i'r Pwyllgor os am caniatâd i dynnu'r 13 argymhelliad yma oddi ar y system tracio. Mae o'r rhain sy'n weddill, mae 12 wedi asesu yn amber, ac o'r 12 yma mae 10 yn hwyr, ac o'r 10 sydd yn hwyr, mae 5 wedi i asesu fel i bod yn flaenoriaeth uchel, ac mae'r rhain wedi amlinellu at delen 3 a 4 o'r papur sydd ger bron y Pwyllgor. O ran yr archwiliad allanol, dim ond un argymhelliad sydd ar ôl, ac mae hwnna wedi gwblhau a'i asesu yn wyrdd. Felly, i gloi Cadeirydd, da ni'n gofyn i'r Pwyllgor i nodi'r adroddiad ac hefyd yn gofyn am ganiatâd i dynnu yr 14 risg sydd wedi asesu'n wyrdd oddi ar y system tracio. Sgolwch yma. Diolch yn fawr.
Okay, thank you, David. Any questions on that? First, are we happy to take the 14 risks off, Ruth?
Yes, I was going to say exactly that. I'm content.
Lovely, thank you. The recommendations that are all overdue, there's quite a lot on recruitment, David, and I just wondered, are they dependent on the drafting of the capacity plan, or is there something else that's holding them up?
They are linked to the capacity plan. I think it's not highlighted in the report, but that's certainly linked there. And so it's certainly that workforce and OD are focusing upon.
Okay. And the only other comment I had was on the terms of reference. We've put that that's complete and we've agreed to take it off. But it would be useful to just review whether that has actually happened. We've said because everybody's committed to taking the terms of reference to their meetings, we've classified that as complete, but I would just like to be assured that they did do it.
Okay.
If that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so no further hands. Oh, Heidi.
Yes, just a query, Chair, with some of the actions where we've said, again, with recruitment that, for example, recruiting managers should be identified and invited to attend training sessions, or staff are aware of requirements. The point of measuring has been that dates have been set up for them to attend, not that all staff have achieved. So I wonder whether we can say they are complete if the point of measurement is that they've actually attended and completed.
Thank you, Heidi. It's the same sort of point, isn't it? When we say it's complete, it should be done really, rather than just that we intend to do it. So I guess perhaps just follow those up, David, if that's those points.
Okay, will do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Heidi.
Okay, thank you for your questions today. So we're on to the committee forward work programme now. So David, are you taking this one?
Yeah, this is the forward programme, obviously, for the next financial year. It's broadly based on the forward work programme we had for last year. So just to invite comment and seek approval for the document from the committee.
Thanks, David. I had a question actually on it, which was the timings. I was a bit confused because the frequency looks odd. Where we say it was biannually, it only seemed to be in once, and there are a couple of others where we said every meeting and it wasn't in every meeting. So I just wondered if I was reading it wrong. Perfectly possible.
So I can't open it up. Open it up for a moment. Just bear with me.
For instance, the first one says biannually, internal audit. Well, I thought internal audit attended every meeting. So I wasn't quite sure whether I was reading it wrong. Anybody help me?
Yeah, I'm having a look now. Kathy can have a look as well.
Jill, that looks like that's the our private meetings with you, that particular one. Which
they're not biannually, are they? Or are they?
Honestly, I can't remember whether we have one before every meeting or.
Okay.
Let's
not labour the point then. If it is only biannually that we have the private meeting, so apologies if that's the case, David.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's the case, but I'll have to get back to you.
Yeah, no, I think that's fine. So so if that's the case, I'm certainly happy that I think it's good that it's all set out, very helpful. Certainly for new committee members and indeed new board members to see the programme set out like that. So thank you. Everybody happy to approve?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm not aware that we've got any items for information or whether we've had any items of any other business. Any items? No. Okay, so that brings us to the conclusion of the meeting. Thank you ever so much. It's been a good meeting, a good long meeting today, and covered lots of territory. So the date of the next meeting is Tuesday, the 12th of April. At 10 a.m. and who knows whether we'll be by Microsoft Teams or let loose to actually meet in a room. in person. So we'll await events and see where we are. So thank you very much, and see you in 5 minutes. Is 5 minutes okay? Because we should start at 12:30, shouldn't we? Yeah. Okay. See you in 5 minutes. Thank you.